Hello and welcome to the Railroad Station. Well, it's been a few days since I posted anything, but we were finishing up The Lightning Thief at Theater Workshop of Owensboro. And if you got a chance to see it, then you guys must have been on for a really special treat. It was a wonderful show, immensely talented cast. Happy to be part of it. But now I have a few days to myself, so I'm going to read The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Chapter 1. Story of the Door. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of a rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile, cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, and when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beaconed from his eye, something indeed which never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in these silent symbols of after-dinner face, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life. He was austere with himself, drank gin when he was alone to mortify the taste of vintages, though he enjoyed the theater, had not crossed the doors of one for 20 years. But he had an approved tolerance for others, sometimes wondering almost with envy at the high pressure of the spirits involved in their misdeeds, and in any extremity inclined to help rather than to reprove. "I incline to Cain's heresy," he used to say quaintly, "and I let my brother go to the devil in his own way." In this character, it was frequently his fortune to be the last reputable acquaintance of the last good influence in the lives of the down-going men. And to such as these, so long as they came about his chambers, he never marked a shade of change in his demeanor. No doubt the feat was easy to Mr. Utterson, for he was undemonstrative at best, and even his friendship seemed to be founded in a similar catholicity of good nature. It is the mark of a modest man to accept his friendly circle ready-made from the hands of opportunity, and that was his lawyer's way. His friends were those of his own blood, or those whom he had known the longest. His affections, like ivy, were the growth of the time. They implied no aptness in object, hence no doubt the bond that united him to Mr. Richard Enfield, his distant kinsman, and well-known man about town. It was a nut to crack for many what these two could see in each other, or what subject they could find in common. It was reported by those who encountered them in their Sunday walks that they said nothing, looked singularly dull, and would hail with obvious relief the appearance of a friend. For all that, the two men put the greatest store by these excursions, counted them the chief jewel of each week, and not only set aside the occasions of pleasure, but even resisted the calls of business that they might enjoy themselves uninterrupted. It chanced by one of these rambles that their way led them down by a street in a busy quarter of London. The street was small and it was quiet, but it drove a thriving trade on the weekdays. The inhabitants were all doing well, it seemed, and they all emulously hoped to do better still, and laying out the surplus of their grains of coquetry, so that the shop fronts stood along the thoroughfare with an air of invitation, like rows of smiling saleswomen. Even on Sunday, when it veiled its more florid charms and lay comparatively empty of passage, the street shone out of contrast to the dingy neighborhood like a fire in the forest, with its freshly painted shutters, well-polished brasses, and general cleanliness and gaiety of the note, instantly caught and pleased the eye of the passenger. Two doors from one corner on the left hand, going east, the line was broken by an entry of a court, and just at that point a certain sinister block of building thrust forward in its gable on the street. It was 2 stories high, showed no window, nothing but a door on the lower story, and a blind forehead of a discolored wall in the upper, and bore in every feature the marks of prolonged and sordid negligence. The door, which was equipped with neither bell nor knocker, was blistered and distained. Tramps slouched into the recess and struck matches on the panels. Children kept shop upon the steps. The schoolboy had tried to use his knife on the moldings, and for close on a generation, no one had appeared to drive away these random visitors or to repair their ravages. Mr. Enfield and the lawyer were on the other side of the street. When they came abreast of the entry, the former lifted his cane and pointed. "Did you ever remark that door?" he asked. When his companion had replied in the affirmative, "It is connected in mind," he added, "with a very odd story." "Indeed," said Mr. Utterson with a slight change of voice. "And what was that?" "Well, it was this way," returned Mr. Enfield. "I was coming home from some place at the end of the world about 3 o'clock of the black winter morning, and my way lay through that part of town where there was literally nothing but lamps. Street after street, and all the folks asleep. Street after street, all lighted up, as if it were for a procession, and all as empty as church, till I got to the last into the state of mind when a man listens, and begins for a slight sight of the policeman. All at once I saw two figures. One was a little man who was stumping along the east side at a good walk. The other, a girl, maybe 8 or 10, who was running as hard as she was able down the cross street. Well, sir, the two ran into another, naturally enough, around the corner, and then each came with the horrible part of the thing. For the man then trampled calmly over the child's body and left her screaming on the ground. It sounds like nothing to hear, but it was hellish to see. It wasn't like a man, it was more like a damned juggernaut. I gave the view a halloo, took to my heels and called in my gentleman, and brought him back to where there had already quite a group around the screaming child. He was perfectly cool and made no resistance, but he gave me one look so ugly that it brought out the sweat on me like running. The people who had turned out were the girl's own family, and pretty soon the doctor, for whom she had spent, put in his appearance. Well, the child was not much the worse, more frightened according to the sawbones, and there you might have supposed would be at the end of it. But that was just one curious circumstance. I had taken a loathing to my gentleman at first sight. So had the child's family, which is only natural. But the doctor's case was what struck me. He was the usual cut of the dry apothecary, with no particular age and colour, with a strong Edinburgh accent, and about as motional as a bagpipe. Yes, sir, he was like the rest of us. Every time he looked at my prisoner, I saw that Sawbones turn sick and white with the desire to kill him. I knew what was in his mind, just as I knew what was in mine, and killing out was out of the question. We did the next best. We told the man we could and would make such a scandal out of this, and we should make his name stink from one end of London to the other. And if he had any friends or any credit, we undertook that he should lose them. And all the time, as we were pitching, it was red hot. We were keeping the women off him as best we could, for they were as wild as harpies. I had never seen or never saw a circle of such hateful faces. Then there was a man in the middle. It was kind of black, sneering coolness, frightened too, I could see that, but carrying it off, sir, really, like Satan. If you choose to make capital out of this accident, he said, I am naturally helpless. No gentleman but wishes to avoid a scene, he says. Name your figure. Well, we were screwed up. I screwed him over £100 for the child's family. He would have clearly liked to stick it out, but there was something about the lot of us that meant mischief when he last struck. The next thing was that he went to get money. And where do you think he carried us? But to the place with that door, whipped out a key, and went in. Presently came back with a matter of £10 in gold, and a cheque for the balance of the courts, drawn payable to the bearer and signed with a name. I can't mention it, though. It's one of those points of my story, but it was the name that very least very well known and often printed. The figure was stiff, but the signature was good for more than that. If it was genuine, I took the liberty of pointing out to my gentleman that the whole business looked like apocryphal, and that the man does not in real life walk into a cellar door at 4 a.m. and come across another man's check for close to £100. It was quite easy and sneering. "Set your mind at rest," he says. "I will stay with you till the bank's open and cash the check myself." So we all set off, and the doctor and the child's father and our friend and myself, and passed the rest of the night in my chambers, and the next day, when we had breakfasted, went into the body of the bank. I came and checked myself, and I said I had every reason to believe it was a forgery. Not a bit of it. The check was genuine.